Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Javier Lomia, and I am the chairperson of the PMAR Realtor Advocacy Committee. On the screen in front of you are members of the Realtor Advocacy Committee, attorney at law, Alan Lazo, executive director of the Fair Housing Council of Oregon. Welcome, Alan. We have Dr. Ernesto Fonseca, my dear friend, chief executive officer of Hacienda CDC. And we've got PMAR staff members who are also with us today. Michelle Gilla, Director of Realtor Advocacy. Whitney Minnick, Assistant Director of Realtor Advocacy. And Mary Jane Mansfield, PMAR Education Advanced Coordinator. All right, so please remember that this isn't a presentation as much as it is a hosted conversation. We encourage your participation by typing your questions in the Q&A. We will not be taking questions or comments live except by committee members due to the format of Zoom. But we are, however, recording this meeting with hopes of sharing it with your fellow PMAR members. And as you might know, April is Fair Housing Month. And as we get started today, I would like to invite Diana McCready, our VP of Realtor Advocacy, to talk about why this is important. Diana, take it away.
You're on mute, Diana.
There we go. Thank you. As Chair Alamia said, April is Fair Housing Month, and last week NAR hosted a live Facebook event, The Past, the Present, and the Future of Fair Housing. And we'll include a link to that in our follow-up for today's event. But I wanted to read you the statement from Charles Oppler, our NAR president, as it speaks to why we are here and the role we play and our association's commitment to fair housing, equity, and inclusion. And here's what he said. When you pick up a newspaper or watch the news or read social media, it could seem at times that there is more that divides us than unites us as Americans. But I wake up every day believing in the spirit and the goodness of humankind. And I believe realtors are and can be a force for good and bringing people together. We do, after all, represent the full fabric and diversity of America in every sense of the word. We come from small towns and suburbs and big cities, from coast to the heartlands, from poverty to very comfortable economic means, from different life experiences defined in no small part by our race, our religion, our education. In all that, we as realtors share the common bond of making the dream of homeownership possible for people, no matter who they are and no matter where they come from. That is no more evident than during Fair Housing Month, as we celebrate the opportunity for everyone to have a shot at that dream and to level the playing field to make that possible. It is my hope that each of us as realtors will hold sacred each day our obligation to that greater purpose, and that we as realtors embrace a higher standard as citizens of the United States of America. Our code of ethics says it well when it notes that the term realtor has come to connote competency, fairness, and high integrity resulting from adherence to a lofty ideal of moral conduct in business relations. So as you conduct your professional and your personal business, I ask that you always remember what you represent as a realtor every time you go out into the community, every time you post on social media, every time you work with someone on a home purchase or sale. In those moments, every American, no matter where they come from or what they believe, is counting on each of us to be consummate professionals and advocate for everyone's home ownership dreams. I am incredibly proud of realtors and the work we do. We represent the best of all that America is and all America can be. Let us continue to work together among ourselves and in our communities to lean in more each day to what unites us. So I echo President Oppler's sentiments, and I am proud of the work we do here and across the country as realtor members in our community. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Diana. To help us start today's discussion, let's review Oregon's history using facts, some of the facts we found on the Fair Housing Council of Oregon's website. And we're gonna have a little activity. Can you guess if the following are true or false when it comes to Oregon's history in fair housing? So I'm going to be reading some statements we found on the website, and let's see how many of these are true or false. Okay, true or false? There was a time when Oregon was known as the most discriminatory state north of the Mason-Dixon line. Well, those are all true. True or false? Until 1926, Oregon's constitution prohibited African Americans from living in the state. Also true. True or false? Oregon once had the largest Ku Klux Klan per capita in the nation. And true or false? As late as the 1960s, cities and towns throughout our state had sundown laws that prevented African Americans and Asians from staying overnight. And finally, true or false? Before 1988, the majority of rental housing was no children allowed. So, I was pretty appalled and shocked when I found all these to be true. Obviously, now that I moved here from another country, and I feel like I live in a pretty liberal, progressive state. These are all true. So that was pretty shocking. So while unfortunately all of those statements were true, we have made great progress, but there's still a lot of work to do. And today we're going to have a conversation about fair housing, where we are today and what we need to do to continue to push forward and face today's challenges. Today we have wonderful experts. We'll talk about how we can push forward and concrete things we can do as realtors and community members. So with us today, again, are attorney at law, Alan Lazo, Executive Director of Fair Housing Council of Oregon, and Dr. Ernesto Fonseca, CEO of Hacienda CDC. So let's kick off our discussion with Alan. Alan, I have 2 quick questions to start.
Sure.
First, how can we as realtors and community members respond to the call for racial justice we've heard so clearly over the past year? That's number 1. And number 2, how do we support fair housing laws and work to create open and inclusive neighborhoods that help communities thrive and be more resilient in the face of crises?
Great. Thanks, Javier. I appreciate that. And just first wanted to wish everyone a happy Fair Housing Month. And so thank you for having Ernesto and I here today to celebrate. I just want to point out, I'm actually not an attorney at law. And so please don't take anything that I give you as legal advice, even if I were, but appreciate the accolades. And Javier, the upside of the questions that you asked me is actually the answer to both of those are very similar, right? The work that we do in fair housing and the work that we do together to create open, inclusive communities also is really rooted in what we can do to support racial justice. When we think about the passage of the Federal Fair Housing Act more than 53 years ago now, it was rooted in the work that Dr. King was doing to end the conditions that Black communities were living in and to end Black-white segregation. And so I think unless anybody here was to contend that that work is done, then that work continues today. And fair housing is about racial justice. So there's a number of things that I would say that you should really pay attention to as you're going through your work, as you're going on this journey to support racial justice. And I think that, one of the things I keep telling people is, just like everybody else during this pandemic, right? I've been walking through my neighborhood with my new pandemic puppy. And one of the Black Lives Matter signs that I've seen that really speaks to me is the one that says, listen, learn, change. Right? So I think we spent a pretty good year listening and learning about the racial inequities that are being borne out in the pandemic. And it really is time for us to change and to understand what actions we need to do to move forward. the other piece of that learn piece, I think the first thing you can do is if you do not know this history that we just covered in the questions that you asked, Javier, we really need to make sure that everyone understands and acknowledges that history and how it got us to where we are today. I think as realtors and professionals in the real estate marketplace, make sure you're staying updated on fair housing laws, right? The laws themselves tend to stay fairly static, but the way we interpret them, the way we apply them tends to change over time. We get much better understanding of what is happening in the marketplace. An example would be where we're headed with the use of criminal history and screening criteria, right? It might also be the use of credit scores and the discriminatory impacts that those types of policies, practices from our history might have on how folks move through the real estate market. The third thing I'd ask you to do, and especially folks on this committee, is I think we need to pause when we are approaching subjects or being asked how we are landing on certain areas, right? And especially if folks, I think there might be a natural inclination when we're in an industry to say, wait a minute, how does that affect my industry? There's a bigger question there, right? It's how does that affect my community? And what is it that we should be looking at as far as other perspectives that might inform positions that we take on different topics? So I'm happy to discuss those further, but didn't want to take up too much more of the beginning time here.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. That's very insightful. I wanted to, just kind of open it up to the committee. If you guys have any other questions for Alan or comments, I want this to be sort of an open discussion as much as we can. So if anybody has anything for Alan. Ernest.
It was listen, learn, and what?
It's listen, learn, and change. If you've seen that, the Black Lives Matter sign that says listen, learn, change.
Okay.
So I think my hope is we're pretty far along to the third item now.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Yeah, it's an important topic, and I think this past year, we've it's so important for us to be having these conversations, and I'm it's a personal mission of mine. Thank you, Michelle, for inviting me to be your chair to bring these conversations forward, without further ado, I also want to introduce you to my dear friend, Dr. Fonseca. So, Ernesto, you and I good friends. I serve on your board. Let's talk about ways Hacienda is helping address some of these issues. So I'll open the floor for you for a few minutes to talk about Hacienda and the services and programs provided. But also, if you can talk about the history of Hacienda and how you help provide safe and stable living conditions for over 1,500 individuals each year. Over half are children. So can you give us a quick intro to Hacienda, Ernesto?
Yes, of course. Thank you, everyone, for having us here today. It's good to see you, Alan. Javier, thank you for inviting me to be part of this group and present today. Before I move to the conversation about Hacienda, I want to reflect a little bit on something that Alan said. And that is, laws change and evolve very slowly, but the way we interpret those laws, the way we change and implement them, changes relatively rapidly. In some cases, overnight. But that comes with awareness. That comes with knowledge of what's happening or what is not happening. If there is no awareness, it will be really difficult for us to change anything. Yesterday, my 15-year-old daughter was texting me when the Derek Chauvin trial was deliberating and the judge was reading the charges against this man. It was extremely sad to see that another life was ended. That was the result that needed to happen. However, the sentencing of this man shouldn't cause any joy for anyone. But that is a little bit of the point. The point is that my daughter was texting us with some of her friends, and many of them said, who is Derek Chauvin? What did he do? When there is no awareness, there will be a very, very big barrier for us to bring any changes in anything that we do. So I really encourage you all, to all of us, including myself. I know very little about Portland and Oregon. I know some of these facts because, we've been working on this field for quite some time. But had I not been, it would have been difficult for me to know them because I didn't pay attention to it carefully. So that's my reflection on some of the words that Alan said. I want to go back to Hacienda now. So Hacienda CDC was formed in 1986, actually. In 1982 was incorporated. In 1988 was incorporated. 1982 we got our first project. And like you, we started, working in housing. What is the need, in Northeast Portland, and why is it that we were joining that particular community? And the answer is pretty simple. There was a lot of crime activity. There was a lot of rundown, slum lord type of housing throughout the Northeast section of Portland. Portland back then was not incorporated until I think it was 1982, I believe. But because of that, a lot of lack of infrastructure, of the housing justice movement doesn't boil down just to the structure that we call a home, the sticks and the mortar that comes with that, with those homes. And it comes with public transportation. It boils down to sidewalks and public spaces and all of that. We didn't have much of that in Northeast Portland. The Colley Park came to be just a few years ago. We opened that park, led by Verde back then. Hacienda started, revitalizing that community in 1992. Since then, we have changed tremendously the way we do business in Northeast Portland. Somebody, when we were working in the groundbreaking of Las Adelitas, our newest project, the 142 units that are going to be replacing what used to be the former Sugar Shack that Javier actually helped us, purchase back then. This place, somebody came very snortily and told me quietly, we should be calling Northeast Portland now, the Hacienda land. And I don't know if he was saying that to be silly or to complain or to, I don't know exactly what message he was trying to say. But I would say is the following, we have about 9 properties in Killingsworth all the way to Northeast Portland. We have absolutely changed the face of how Northeast Portland looks and feels. And we're going to do this again and again and again. And it's not that we want to fill everything, with affordable housing. The concentration of anything and anybody, whether it's wealth or poverty, is never good. We want to have a very good mix of incomes and different family types in this community. Ideally, that's what we would like to do. But the need of affordable housing is big, and there is not enough. Not in Northeast Portland, Central Portland, wherever you go, there is not enough. But we have to be careful as to where we place these developments so we can do it right. And I think that we have been pretty successful, developing not just housing. There is one big principle that drives Hacienda CDC and me personally. In order to advance the health and livability of our communities, in order to advance the progress of those communities and individuals, we have to offer much more than housing, because housing is not enough. Housing is the base, is the beginning of something, but it's absolutely not enough. If you keep housing people just for the sake of housing, that is called warehousing, in my view. If we don't provide them with the tools and the opportunities for them to move forward, we will never be able to end or at least mitigate this cycle of poverty. Because of that, we've been working on these issues forever. Hacienda CDC provides what I call, the 4 pillars of the organization. And that is affordable housing, obviously. We provide services through youth and family services, which is after school programming all the way through high school, and then sending people into college with some scholarships. We also provide small business development. This piece of small business development is a very significant portion of what we do, because college is not for everyone. Being an employee necessarily is not for everyone. We have to evolve from this idea that having a college degree, that I extremely support, education has been a big part of my life. But I also know that not everybody wants and desires to have a college degree, especially an advanced college degree. And therefore, we need to open those opportunities. We should not treat these people as second-class citizens simply because they don't have a master's degree or anything like that. Some of the people that I know that are extremely successful, a couple of them at least, don't have not even a college degree at all. My respect for people, hard work, and all of that is what really, brings us together to this conversation. So small business development, a big piece of what we do to support families and individuals to do better. And then finally, economic opportunity. On this department, we're going to be relaunching our mortgage lending program. We're going to continue helping families buy homes and continue helping families to stay in their homes. So foreclosure prevention, home ownership, as well as mortgage lending. All of these tools are still, even then, are not necessarily ideal, and they are not enough, but they are starting to make at least, this formula that supports families in order for them to keep moving forward. So that's what we do. That's what Hacienda does. When I get an opportunity, I can present a little bit some of the numbers that I share with all of you. But I'm really, really excited with the work that we've been doing for years. Javier has been part of this movement for many years now. And I'm excited to share some of those numbers with you in my next chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernesto. And it's been my privilege to serve on your board. And when I started back in real estate in 2005, I quickly realized how there's so many roadblocks for my community to get into homeownership, not only because the information wasn't available, but also there were so many predatory lenders out there that were taking advantage of people not being able to read these documents, putting them into adjustable rate mortgages with prepayment penalties, all kinds of nasty stuff that, so it's been the foundation of my business. And, being a part of Hacienda has elevated my career in a lot of ways. So thank you, Ernesto. So I wanted to give Ernesto an opportunity to share some of these numbers that he talked about. I know, Michelle, do you have a slideshow for him? So yeah, so if you can share the screen, maybe Ernesto can walk us through some of those numbers and sort of brag a little bit about Hacienda. You're muted, Ernesto.
Sorry. Thank you, Javier. This is our preliminary draft annual report. We put these numbers together every single year. We release them in June to everybody that has been working with us and supporting our organization to do this. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that Hacienda CDC, it's a multi-pronged organization that really tries to support everybody that we can within those 4 branches that I talked to you about. And these are the 4 front-facing departments that we discussed. 333 students, 214 small businesses, 793 home buyers, and over 1,600 residents in our properties in 9 different properties. In total, almost 3,000 people. And here's the thing, 3,000 people may not sound like a lot, but it is a significant number of people that is changing, that we're changing the lives on them. I want to believe that this is the impact that we're bringing to many of these families. If we go to the next slide, you will see that, for example, when it came to COVID, Javier somebody was asking me recently, so what did you guys do to support families during this crisis? We did much more than we ever do typically. We don't do this kind of support. We don't do rental assistance, for example. We don't do cash assistance or any other direct assistance of any type. We don't do it. However, with our different partnerships, some foundations and everybody else that came to support Hacienda, we're able to raise almost $2 million to give away, literally, to help families, pay for the rents, to help families, that were losing their jobs because of the pandemic, to get them some cash into their pockets, where it's $500 up to $4,000 we're giving away to individuals, and other direct cash assistance. That's what makes an organization staying relevant. In order for us to keep moving forward, we have to really find and pay attention to what is going on. And for that, we need to be informed. And that will make us and will continue to make us very, very relevant. We go to the next slide. You'll see that youth and family services, for example, this is also in addition to what we do, which is the after school programs, but we deliver laptops, internet cards, Wi-Fi spots, hotspots, All of these opportunities are opportunities that we bring to a community for them to increase their access, to minimize a little bit the digital divide, to help, families succeed in some ways that we typically didn't do. But all of these things are in response to a crisis. We used to have kids in schools. We used to have, families having the entire morning free. Now they don't. And now we have a bunch of kids in their houses stuck in there. Many of them don't have internet. So we need to have the infrastructure to support the families in that way. If we move to the next slide, you'll see that what I was discussing about the empresarios. This is a nicer breakdown of everything that we did. And these meals, if you pay attention to the numbers, the 2000s plus numbers, we increase our technical assistance support for many of these businesses, and that technical support included brokering partnerships with many different organizations, whether it's Clackamas Women's Center to sell and to bring lunches to these women to support them in so many ways, whether delivering lunches to other individuals, everything coming out of the Portland Mercado. Why did we do that? Well, simply because they lost a lot of sales overnight. They are recovering and they are coming back strongly, but we support them with rent forgiveness, we support them with cash assistance, and we support them obviously with finding new opportunities for them to grow. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that one of the things that we've been pretty good at, over the past several years, I've been here for 4 years in Hacienda. Hacienda didn't pay a lot of effort into developing more affordable housing as we were developing more service support, those individuals. But over the 4 years that we've been here, we have increased our capacity in terms of real estate development. And we will have online 860 units by 2022, by next year. And we are developing actively right now 690 units in addition to the 381 that we currently have. So I am just really excited that I came to a place that really enabled me to bring all of this change put together. And it helps, that there is a lot of money on the streets right now for affordable housing. It's sadly, I must say that this crisis has highlighted Hacienda services and highlighted our support to the community much more. I mean, that in terms of what we do is important and it's good for us because people are getting to know us a little better, but not really the way we wanted for that to happen, through a pandemic. Finally, I think I just want to discuss the final slide, which is economic opportunity, and then we can, there's more. There are a couple more slides, but I think this will be the one that I want to close with. Economic opportunity is a department that supports families with asset creation, whether it's keeping a house, owning a house, getting educated to buy a house, providing access to different opportunities, lending, small lending circles, or mortgage lending. We suspended last year a little bit the mortgage lending process simply because it was just extremely crazy and there were other priorities that we had to focus on. But this is absolutely what we do. I'm really proud of the team that we have and the board that we have that has enabled us to make all of this happen, within a year. So that's it for me today.
Thank you so much, Ernesto. I'm going to apologize to everybody. I lied. This was sort of a presentation, but I want to go back to making it an open discussion. So if anybody has any questions for Ernesto about the programs that the Hacienda provides, I mean, a lot of it is, they are a community development corporation. We provide a lot of affordable housing within the city. But, the ultimate dream is to, as far as we are concerned as real estate agents, I mean, how do we get people into homes and home ownership? They have a really, really strong program for home ownership and in education. So if anybody has any questions, I know Mavi, you have a lot to say. So you're staying quiet.
I always have enough to say, but I wanted to make sure Ernesto, gracias. I guess one of my questions is right now, especially with, the availability of grants and what is that, how is it that process that you guys are working with your, home buyers in terms of allocating what funds are available to get? And is it a pool? How is it that, you're allocating funds for your clients, for your buyers?
Well, we're working with different partners. We not always have, the right resources to provide to the families or home buyers. So we work with the Portland Housing Center. We work with the state. We work with AMCOA Bank. If we don't have what we need to offer, what the family needs to get in order for them to get a house, then we try to partner with other organizations to bring those resources to us. We do have a down payment assistance program, but it's not very large. I think it's up to 35,000, and then we find other resources within, the sister organizations that I mentioned earlier. And those partnerships are very significant because they also have many more resources. The Portland Housing Center, for example, they have the LIFT program, through Wells Fargo, and they have other resources. So we're not doing this alone. That is the other piece that I neglected to mention. Everything that we do is in partnership with many others. Hacienda is simply the channel, the conduit to bring all of these opportunities moving forward. Of course, we bring our own resources, but we couldn't do a fraction of everything that we did without the support of the many.
Ernesto, so for all of the other realtors that may not be very familiar with Hacienda's work, how do we, if any of us feel like we have a potential buyer that may benefit from some of your programs, how do they get in touch with you?
They can send an email to home@haciendacdc.org, and that will be reviewed by all of our team members and send it, to the right person. So that will be the best way to get a hold of us. Otherwise, through calling our general number, but that is complicated because right now we don't have a lot of staff in the office. So I would recommend highly to use the email address or simply send us a message via Facebook. So if you PM us in Facebook, we absolutely respond on that one relatively soon. And when I say relatively soon, I'm talking about, 1 or 2, 24 hours.
And I have a personal story about this. I'm gonna brag a little bit about Hacienda Services and some of the programs they provide. We got a single mom into a home, and I think this was listed at $370. We got it as a backup offer at $400, so $30,000 over asking price, and we got her $40,000 in CDBG funds. These are distributed by the Portland Housing Bureau, so it was a significant grant. Without these programs and Hacienda's connections with these partners, that wouldn't be possible. So it is possible. Sometimes it takes writing 2, 3, 4 offers, but these programs are out there. Does anybody else have any questions for Ernesto? I want to also encourage our members, our PMAR members that are maybe watching us online, to type in some questions in the chat box. Please.
Javier, if I could, I want to just follow up on a few of the points that Ernesto brought up, if that's
sure.
If this is a good moment to do that.
Of course.
I think there are a number of things that I so appreciate about the work that Ernesto and his team does at Hacienda. Ernesto, I don't know if you know this, but I actually live walking distance from where you all are at Hacienda there and for Las Adelitas. And so and in the work I do, we've been sort of watching the Cully area for a long time. It sort of becomes this lab where we can see if making these kinds of investments can create a community that can stem off the displacement that we've seen in other places, right? It's so hard to understand whether or not all these efforts will work. And so it's really interesting to watch what's happening in Cully there. But a couple of pieces about what you said, Ernesto. I think one is that we really do recognize right now that the ability to put people in homes or into housing is part of the way we can create resiliency as we have further coming crises. We know that those communities have been more greatly impacted in the current crises around COVID-19. And one of the ways that we can prepare for that next crisis is making sure we get folks into safe, stable, affordable housing that is free from discrimination. So that becomes very important when we start to talk about crisis response and resiliency in communities. The other thing that's so important about the work that Hacienda and other community development corporations does, it recognizes that housing isn't just, as I like to say, about the roof over our heads. It's actually about the access to opportunity out the front door. And it looks like a lot of different things, right? It is not just the buildings. It's not just even opportunities for home ownership. And to some degree for realties, right, that translates into location, location, location. So not only is it about locating somewhere that might already be high opportunity, but maybe it's also about supporting communities to create opportunity where they are, and to create those home ownership opportunities where they are, and to really build communities. And I think when we see community development corporations like Hacienda doing that work, it's really encouraging to think about that pathway into the way we create these open, inclusive communities that are so dear to our hearts as values, as Portlanders and as Oregonians. The last piece I'll say also is that I think that what Hacienda and other organizations like that highlight is the importance of these partnerships with culturally specific organizations, right? We know that disparities exist along racial lines, especially in home ownership. And one of the ways that we get to that is by working with those communities that have trusted organizations that are supporting them. And I think it's an important thing to think about, and it can be a very difficult conversation and a really difficult concept for us to deal with. We saw that in some of the CARES Act funding that went to the Black community, right? And so I think it's something that we very carefully need to think about how we are approaching that particular concept. And how we might be able to best support it, frankly.
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, so these are all very important conversations. I think if anybody has any questions for Alan or Ernesto, I welcome them. Again, if any of you guys are watching us on the Zoom, I welcome your questions.
Javier,
Oh,
I wanted to ask Ernesto really quick in regards to Las Adelitas. Is that going to be solely, is it going to be like your other homes, or, you know, is it condos? Is it townhouses? I'm kind of a little bit, I used to work for Verde, so I know a little bit about the project. So I guess, is it going to be mixed use? Are there going to be opportunities for, you know, some of the community members who are entrepreneurs to have, you know, a business established there?
Right. So that's a really good question. I'm going to share this because I'm so proud of this whole thing. So this is a $58 million project, and it's going to be massive. It's not going to be a traditional, you know, townhome that we typically do, or
Pardon me, Ernesto, you're sharing not what you think you're sharing.
What am I sharing here? I'm sharing the house, right?
You're sharing us your sort of your drive. So you must have another window open.
Oh, okay. Hold on a sec. I have so many windows open. Okay. All right. So what I was saying is going to be a multi-housing project. So I think this is going to be departing a little bit from what we typically do. Can you see this now?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what we're doing. It's going to be a really large project along Killingsworth and Cully. It's going to have 142 units. Yes, it's going to have some space for entrepreneurs. It's going to have a hall for gatherings, as well as weddings, quinceañeras, you name it. And it's going to have also a facility for daycare, although we don't have a program for that just yet. But all of those opportunities are opportunities that we typically see as needs in the community based on what we have been hearing. So maybe it's going to be a little different what we currently have, but it's going to be so beautiful. I think you guys like it.
I'm excited to see the project. I've been a part of it from afar now, but it looks really awesome. I do have another question for you, because you mentioned that your programs, you have, you know, the homeownership piece. There's also the, you know, foreclosure prevention. One thing I'm not quite sure of, and I think there is a need for it, is do you have a program, or in the future, do you see Hacienda maybe having a program to prepare your current tenants? Because I know that you know, most of your you know, you have the apartments there, the development. is there going to be a program to prepare your tenants that you have currently so that they can become homeowners? I know that, there's a lot you have, I can't remember, it was like what, 1,600, tenants. And so what's the plan for that? Because I think that they all have the desire to become homeowners. And is there going to be, or maybe is that something that, Hacienda will see of doing in the future? I have yet to see a home buying, entity or nonprofit kind of do something, which I really think it's needed. I think that we have a lot of renters out there that, would love to, but they don't know how to get started. And then what does it mean to be a homeowner? It's just a lot more than just, getting into the home. So how do, a program just came to mind. And so I thought I would share that with you and see if that's something that you guys are thinking of.
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a few years now. We have not been able to figure it out, the financial model to do affordable housing for sale. So the idea, and I came with this concept, for, when people interview me, the board, when I talk to the staff, we need to figure out a way to get people out of rental properties and to get them into owning their properties at some point. We can't and don't have the capacity to really build affordable housing for anybody that needs a, first type of home for them to be at. So yes, the concept and the idea is for us to keep doing this and do affordable housing for sale. But right now we don't have the model to do it. What I've been doing though, is supporting Habitat for Humanity and program into getting more funding from the state and more funding from the feds for them to do more affordable housing for sale. They do have different sources that supports them to make this happen. And we could adopt a similar model to what they have, but right now we haven't been able to put all of our efforts into that particular track. I've been here for 4 years. So in 4 years, my goal was to stabilize the organization, do more affordable housing development, and obviously, do whatever we could do in that period of time. Now that I'm feeling a little more comfortable, I think that is one of the main strategic ideas that we have in our strategic plan to start working on. But it is a 3-year plan for that matter, for that particular strategy. And I'm not really sure yet, to what extent we're going to be making an impact. We have a plan to do 35 affordable housing units for sale in our Clara Vista property. So we're going to be doing another 125 affordable homes and then 35 for sale. That will be our test. But those are not coming online until 2023. So we're into the design phase right now. The pre-development, the whole thing. So design, permitting, and probably by 2023, we're already way in our way under construction. So we're going to do it. I just don't know. Like I do things, I'm gonna test it, and if we lose our shirts, then I will have to recalibrate and come back and see what we do next. So.
Ernesto, I think one of the partners you mentioned, Portland Housing Center, also does sort of homeownership readiness work, especially for communities of color.
Yeah, they do, and they do a really good job. Yeah. They are probably one of the biggest lenders also, for our community. So it's a good thing. They are good partners.
Yeah. Diana, did you have a question?
Well, I thought maybe I missed something. Mabi, were you getting at an educational opportunity for people versus the actual homes being available to purchase? I thought you were getting more at, what kind of educational opportunities?
Yeah, it was kind of a 2-part. So the education piece and then what opportunities within Hacienda. And so, yes.
And I think I don't need to step in to answer Ernesto's question, but we're pretty active at taking a survey of our tenants and seeing who's ready to get into home ownership. And a lot of the work is it's sort of like it's a process, right? Hacienda is sort of a landing pad for people that need quick affordable housing in the city, so they don't get displaced out to Vancouver or Gresham or to the suburbs. But also the Portland Mercado is a business incubator, right? So they can become, they can at one point hopefully have a brick and mortar restaurant. and ultimately be able to achieve the dream of homeownership. So I think it's, but yeah, I mean, and something that we need to get better at, Ernesto, to be honest, there's, unfortunately, a large portion of our community is just not quite ready to buy a home, right? And you and I know this, Mavi. I mean, out of 100%, maybe, only a small portion, 25% are going to be mortgage ready. So, but it's a work in progress, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. And Alan, thanks for pointing out the education piece in terms of the Portland Housing Center. I had forgotten that, yes, they have the Home Ready program, which I think is fantastic. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I had forgotten about that.
I think we might see additional investments in that too across the state. If you've been following the work that's come out of the legislators' joint task force on addressing racial disparities in homeownership, I think where they're looking at some investments is around homeownership readiness in communities of color.
Alan, I want to bring you back in, and I just want to, it's 10:47 now. We've got about 13 minutes to go. I had kind of a loaded question, right? How can we as realtors be true ambassadors for fair housing? But if there are one or two things we can do to be more aware of going forward, what are they and why are they important, do you think?
Yeah, good question, Javier. And I think it goes back to those kind of three pieces that I opened with, really around that make sure we understand and acknowledge that history. And I think it's important. I think it's really important for me, not just in the fact that we have this, as you kind of went through those questions at the beginning, this sort of tragic history, but the important part about it is the inequities that it's led to today. And so to me, that's where the next piece of that learning is to understand how those two pieces are connected, right? We know that, for instance, the homeownership gap by race is really directly connected to some of the lack of opportunity that things like redlining and steering created back in our history. And so we can't really address the inequities have today without understanding that first piece. And so I think if you come across colleagues that you feel like don't understand that, bring them into the fold and find ways to do that. For the last year and this year, we haven't had the opportunity to run our bus tours about housing discrimination, segregation, and displacement, but we hope to be back next year. We actually are working on a virtual presentation of that that we will be able to roll out to organizations. So hopefully that's coming down the line. And it's really intended, again, to make that connection between that history, the inequities we have today, and why it is important to do things like work with culturally specific organizations to close those gaps intentionally. And that would be the other piece, right? And that's a really hard needle to thread coming from somebody in the fair housing movement, right? How do we actually serve these communities that are that have been so under invested in over time in a way that doesn't violate the Fair Housing Act? Incredibly difficult a needle to thread. And so I think anything that you all can do to be creative about how we get there, I think is welcome. And I think that, as I said, the Joint Task Force at the legislature that's looking at racial disparities in homeownership is trying to find those places. Is it investing in culturally specific organizations to move their homeownership education forward? Is it working on training? As you saw, you've probably seen the bill moving through the legislature about working on training on the realtor side. Where can we make some actual inroads? To me, the really difficult piece that doesn't allow us to do that is to do preferences by race. Right? It's pretty clear that we have inequities by race, but we really don't have a very good way to do preferences by race that would really help create actual justice for what has happened over time. You're starting to see that in different places. One of the big stories you might see circulating is about the piece of land, the beach property in California, and I'm going to totally not remember it, but that's being returned to the Black family. It's worth about $7.5 million now.
Oh, wow.
It was seized from, it was a beach resort in California that was seized from a Black family in the mid part of the 20th century at a time when their segregationist policies said you're not allowed to own this land, and is now looking at being returned to them. It was seized by the government. So it was actually owned now by the government and is looked at being returned to the Black family or their heirs there. So it's really interesting to think about what those opportunities might look like. And I think, again, under the Fair Housing Act and the work that we have now, it's just very, very difficult needle to thread. And I'm not sure there's a great way to look at it in a home ownership framework, frankly. So that's what I say. And then again, the other is just that pausing to consider how you as an organization or you individually are showing up in conversations that really touch on that intersection between the work you do in real estate and racial justice. And I'm happy to kind of throw out some examples, whether it's in, where we came from in the conversation about House Bill 2001 and middle housing, or the one that's moving around right now is around mortgage interest deduction reform, which I think is a highly controversial topic. The one thing I would say is there a perspective we can open up about how that might intersect with racial justice and how those kinds of conversations, again, might intersect in the same way that HB 2001 and middle housing and exclusionary nature of single family residential zoning intersects so closely with the history of racial justice. So those are the kind of the pieces I have for you that I would say.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Michelle, do you have a question?
I do. So you're tying the room together here. And so as a PMAR's lobbyist, I'm really curious how you see we've passed some landmark legislation statewide. In Portland now, we have the residential infill project, we have the housing bond, we have supportive services dollars coming available. And now we have probably next week with, the extra amendments, our shelter to housing continuum. So we have some really interesting tools in the toolbox to talk about the housing crisis, but we all know the housing crisis isn't just about housing.
That's right.
So what are the other conversations and ideas we could be looking to put together the other pieces, whether it be, fair wages or economic development? Those are all, we can't fix problems if we're only sort of going with the one prong, right?
Yeah.
We have to have a meeting of an intersection of many different ideas. So is there anything that rises to the surface for you right now?
Yeah, and I think it is holding a conversation for all of us, regardless of how we identify around racial justice. And by that, I mean, the examples I think you use, Michelle, are really fantastic, right? There's been this movement around supply side, right? And I don't know how you identify or prescribe yourself, but we have this whole YIMBY movement, right? Yes, in my backyard, the opposite of where we were with not in my backyard. What I might offer is that doesn't go quite far enough. I've kind of thrown around some funny other acronyms. One is YAKIMBY, right? And so it's actually, yes, if I can keep my backyard. Yeah. Because we also know that in places even like Cully, right, that development might bring displacement. And so I'm all for development, but not if it's for displacement. And I think that's what communities are telling us. So how do we pay attention to that? And that actually came up in the residential infill project, right? When we looked at how that might play out across neighborhoods, the overriding narrative was it will reduce displacement. But when we look inside the numbers, what we actually saw was that it would reduce displacement in neighborhoods that had a higher percentage of white residents than communities of color, which makes sense, right? When we think about the way racial segregation has played out across neighborhoods in our city, some of the wealthier neighborhoods have higher white population, and so the land is more expensive there, so it's less likely to redevelop into this middle housing. Whereas where communities of color live, have lower land values, is more likely to redevelop, more likely to potentially displace. So what you saw move forward, for instance, then that came from communities is let's provide a upzoning bonus, density bonus for affordable housing developers, the sixplex option, right? So that's one way of thinking about it and listening to communities say, what is it you need? Well, I want you to develop more here if I can actually afford it, right? That's the other one. I haven't been able to say the acronym, but it's yes in my backyard if I can afford it, right? So yeah, build it here if I can actually move into it. If you're going to build it here and I can't move into it, it doesn't necessarily help me. So how can we be intentional about meeting those outcomes, right? If we want to hold a value around racial justice, how do we meet those outcomes intentionally? Not, I like to tell folks that I should warn people before they invite me onto panels that I'm the guy that has more questions than answers. So,
Alan, I know that you have you're going to be hosting an event. It's called "It's Fun for All Kinds of Neighborhoods." Can you tell us where to register and what that's all about?
Yeah, absolutely. On April 29th, we're having our second annual mission-centered fundraising event, and we are so thankful for PMAR to being a supporter of that event. You can go to our website at www.fhco.org and register, and it'll be at 5:30 to 6. It's a real quick just overview and introduction to the work that we're doing as an organization. You'll hear from some of our partners across the state. We'll actually also be honoring Leroy Patton, who has been our board chair for more than 30 years. So we'll have a special video to talk about Leroy's history and the work that he's done with our organization. So we're grateful for your support.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Ernesto, for your wonderful insight. Does anybody have any final comments, questions? Want to give everybody an opportunity to chime in at the end. Yeah, this is exciting. Great to meet you, Alan. Thank you for everything. Ernesto, my friend, muchas gracias. This is awesome. I really appreciate it. So thank you everybody for joining us today. Before we leave, we want to make sure you know about our upcoming events. PMAR's Fair Housing Month is happening all during the month of April. And our new Whitney Minnick, new assistant director, is here to let us know about some of these opportunities. Whitney.
Thank you so much, Chairman Alomia. I'm going to share some opportunities that we'll be doing and have been doing in conjunction with PMAR and NAR. If I can get this to work. Perfect. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so fair housing obviously is for everyone, and what we want to do is continue this conversation. It's all about continued conversation and continue to make progress. So we want to make sure that you're following us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and you're sharing, liking, loving these things, interacting with them with the post, really to engage in the conversation, sharing them on your page to engage others. You know, it's not just about our realtor community learning about fair housing, it's about sharing this information with others so that everyone is aware. We have other events. You can see the events that have passed, and all this information we'll send out in the follow-up today. So if you're interested in any of this, it'll be included. But we have other events coming up. So make sure that you sign up, and you can go to PMAR's event page. We'll have a link to that as well to sign up for all of these events. So you want to do even more. Everyone learns really differently. I'm a visual learner, but some people really like podcasts. So there are ways you can continue your learning. There you can also read, and you can look at career choices in real estate. How can you incorporate that into your business? So NAR really has some wonderful resources that no matter what style of learning you want to go direction in, they have something that will fit you. And I've done this one, the Fair Haven. If you haven't taken the Fair Haven interactive simulation training, it is a must. You can take it multiple times. You can see how, when you respond in different ways, how that can affect the outcome. So it's another tool that NAR has launched that really can help you take the tools that you've learned and apply them in real situations, and hopefully before you're in that situation too. So if you ever come into that, you know also how to handle it. And again, it's all about sharing the message of fair housing. So NAR has some really great assets that you can download. And again, this will be included in the follow-up today, but you can download these assets and share them, because again, it's not just about sharing within our realtor community, it's about sharing with everyone so that everyone is aware what is important. And of course, we want, outside of our panelists today and our committee members, we also want to thank our 2021 PMAR partners. Without them, we couldn't do everything that we do, and we're so thankful for their partnership. And I'm going to pass it to Michelle G., our Director of Realtor Advocacy, who will talk about some more stuff coming up. Michelle?
Sure, thank you. And thank you so much, Alan and Ernesto, for joining us today, and Javier for stepping up into this role to be the chairperson for our committee. We can't do it without our members, and these are important conversations. Whitney and I are available to all of our members who have questions, comments, want more information. We're working full-time for you, so please use us as your resource. And I invite both Hacienda and Fair Housing Council of Oregon to also use us as a resource. We would enjoy having the opportunity to connect more on these topics and more. This is a standing committee. We meet every other month, all the even months of the year. So if you have been attending and have more interest in serving in this role, having these conversations, please contact me so we could talk about joining the committee. And that's all I've got. Javier, back to you.
Well, thank you, everybody. I hope to see you all in June for Homeownership Month, and get out there and enjoy this wonderful weather. I don't know if it's going to last this long. So good to see you, everybody. Thank you, Ernesto. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Whitney.
Good to see you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.